Hi quilters! Have you ever wondered what to do with the selvages that you have left over from the yardage of your projects that you've done in the past? I used to take all of these and I would stuff them in the trash, and that would be the end of my thought process as far as they would go. But over time, I found that I can use them in smaller projects. So this week, I've been occupied with a few smaller projects that you can do with your selvage edges. You may be thinking as soon as you come home, you want to slice this stuff off and get rid of it and process your fabric, have it ready for your next project. But unless you're doing your project right away, you may want to leave your selvages until you're actually ready to cut your fabric and you have a plan as far as how you're cutting your fabric. So some of the information that you can find on these will actually be good if for some reason you need to order more fabric. Like these have a website that you can order off of. You know who makes the fabric. This can be very useful. Also, if you're in a store, one of the things that you can look at is you can look at your little dots here, and they will tell you all of the colors that are in your fabric. This is primarily for people who work in the industry, but it is also very useful if you're just kind of wanting to go, I wonder if that goes with that. And you can look at your dots and see if you can match up colors. And that way you know that you have a perfect match as far as your colors go when you start working on your quilt. Moving on from why you may want to keep your selvages is what I would think is a much more common situation. If you have a bag like this that's just full of scraps, and this is all strips of fabric for me, and it doesn't look like so much when it's in the bag, but when you start to bring it out and fluff it out, you realize, hey man, I got a lot of this, I got to do something with it. And so most of this is between a 1/2 inch and 1 inch strips. So I've sewn this on the back, and I have the batting here. And what I want to do is kind of find a centerpiece. So I've got a longer strip here, and I'm going to come along here. This is a great selvage project because it's got a lot of selvages in it. And these are the pieces that I don't normally cut. And what I'm going to do is this piece is going to be the foundation. I'm going to start by sewing one on the center, just up and down the center like this. And then I'm going to bring another piece, right sides together, and I'm going to sew that. This will give me quilting lines here. And as I go along, all of the quilting will be done on this side as I'm quilting it. I've taken my first set of stitches and I've just gone corner to corner with this set of stitches with the right side down, and then you flip it over like this, fold it back, and I just finger press this, and you'll lay your next piece on. So I have a piece laid out right here. And the only thing that I'll do is I will check to make sure that it's big enough to cover the area that I want. These are not straight pieces necessarily. I haven't trimmed them up. These two happen to match pretty well. They're about 1 inch in width. And I'll take my next set of stitches on this. So you're just putting them right sides together, and this will create your quilting on your piece here. Actually, I think I need to lighten up my presser foot a little bit. So now we have this, and the next step is to trim it. Notice I didn't do any trimming while I was cutting. But if you look over, let's see if you can catch it. You can see that the quilting has already been done. So I already have my square outline here, and all I have to do is trim off the edges and then finish it. There you have it. Now these I will use probably either as a giant pot holder. My husband loves these. He has big hands and he likes something. I like them because you can actually double them up like this and grab things. And I also, sometimes if I'm pulling like something out of the microwave, I will just use this as a placemat. Just like I have a bag of scrap selvages, I also have a bag of scrap binding. I'm pulling out a few colors that I think might work well. This will go around the edge of the project. Normally, I think I would lean toward the red or the orange because they're nice and bright. But in this case, I think that the purple has more of the colors that I'm looking for. As it turned out, I did several of these and I sent them off to my daughters. My first pick was the purple binding, but after I did the purple binding, I came back and I did the red and I did the orange, and I like them equally well in these other colors too. I really haven't even put a dent in my scrap mountain, and I may have to think of some other projects that involve the strip piecing because I really like doing this. It's really quick. And you don't have to straighten up your strips, you just sew them down, so that makes it easy too. And so I would recommend this for anybody if you have a lot of strips of fabric that you would normally throw away. Since I had so many of these selvage pieces, I've decided to do a few more projects and started with Christmas trees. There are numerous ways to do this. What I've chosen was I got a clip art off the computer because I didn't think that you needed to reinvent the wheel for this. And I just ran it through my embroidery software, and then I ran the first set of stitches, which is the trace. And from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down my strips of fabric across it like this. So I've never tried this before, so you're right along with me as I do this way. And so what I've done is I put my strips along here, and then I'm going to come back with a pair of scissors, and I'm going to trim this off. So now I have glued one down. I almost never use glue on these, but I've ran a second trace on this, and I put just a glue stick to glue this down, and I'm just going to lay it in here exactly where my trace stitches are. Now that I've ran my tack down stitches, I'm going to come back and I'm going to lay a piece of fabric on like this, face up. This one you can't tell because it's a batik and it prints all the way through, but I want whatever your fabric is, to go face up. And I'm going to run my trace one more time, and then I'm going to run my satin stitches. So what happened here, this one is okay. I actually knocked my machine with my chair, which is something that now I'm going to have to go back and fix. So I'm just going to put this on my regular machine and do a little bit wider satin stitch to come back and join this together where this mistake was made. But as you can see, what I've done is I've gone and trimmed after I put after I floated my fabric. I came back and I cut out the inside. I just grabbed a little pin and pulled it up a little bit, and then cut around the edge to reveal the fabric that was below. And then I did the satin stitch over that. Like I said, don't do what I did in this case. Now let's go over these pieces. So what you've done here is I've used Insulbright, which is like it reflects the heat back. So I've used this on the inside rather than regular batting. I've used a dark color on what will be the inside of this project and on the outside. So these are your two pieces, your top and your bottom, and you basically basted everything together. And the next thing that you'll do is, I like to add, so this is your top, and this is your the back of your bottom. I'd like to add a loop here, and I will add binding like this. That way, when your loop can be out of the way when you, or actually I think I'll use it, put it on this side. Your binding will be out of the way, or your loop will be out of the way when you're not using it. And when you need it, it can fold out and be used. And so you'll sew your right sides together, which will be the outside of this. And that is how everything will go together. So once you've got it bound and you've got your two right sides on the inside, then you will just go ahead and you'll flip it inside out. So that's it for these. They have a loop on the back and they have the Christmas tree on the front. These will work well in my kitchen and I'm very pleased with them. With the hearts, I decided to use the same method as I'd used with the Christmas tree. So I put the strips of fabric underneath and then I ran the tack down stitch on top of them. I placed the red fabric on top and then I ran a tack down stitch for it and then a satin stitch. And then I decided to embroider these. So shout out to Courtney, my daughter, and her fiance John. These probably will end up in their possession around Valentine's Day. The plan here is to put some borders on this and make it into a pillow. I've had quite a few selvage projects this week, which is good, but it's taken up quite a bit of time. So I have these done, which are the original pot holders that I did, and they have a little loop on the back. I like them that way. I've also got this kind of mitts, and I thought they would be a cheery Christmas theme. And then I decided to use some selvages this way. So these are the cutaways where I have laid down the selvage pieces underneath and then just cut away the tops. I will also have the hearts that I've cut out and be able to use them again in a different project. But these went by pretty quick. And I also did an elephant in this, just laid the selvage under and cut away to reveal the elephant underneath. And oh, let me talk about this also. Where do I have it? So with a project like this, where I was testing it, I also did a test project. Even though this wasn't done with selvages, anytime that I do an embroidery, I always want to test it to make sure that it stitches out right before I do it on my chosen fabric. And I thought this was cute. This is, it's an off pink and it's got like a really light pink background. So I thought this would be a nice one for a little girl. But it's not the main project I was doing. It was just a test, but I always like to finish up my tests and have them as gifts for people also. So now the last thing I want to cover is my after action report on these projects that I've done. And there are a couple of things that I would suggest that I didn't know when I started these, but in further consideration, I would definitely suggest these. The first thing is if you're using a rolly chair, be very careful around your embroidery machine, because if you bump your hoop while it's sewing, it will mess up your embroidery. And so rolly chairs are bad about when you get up, they swing around. So you just got to be a little bit careful with that. The next thing that I would talk about is the stitch length on my embroideries. So these are raw edge appliques. They've got more fabric than I would usually use in a raw edge applique. So the thing that I would suggest is a longer stitch. So the in the part that swings from side to side on your stitch length. So on your satin stitches, I had originally used a 2mm stitch, and I would either beef it up to like a 3 or a 4mm stitch. When I came around and did a 4mm stitch to cover up the mistake that had been caused by me bumping the hoop, I used a 4mm stitch, and it did a really nice job of making sure that the outside edges were covered on your applique. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell for more compulsive quilting and embroidery videos.